Hola, hello. This is New Mexico History in 10 minutes, and I am Robert Martinez, State Historian of New Mexico. Padre Martinez of Taos is one of the most fascinating persons in New Mexico history and one of my favorites. I'm a little biased. He happens to be my great, 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 great uncle on my mom's side. But he's quite amazing. He lived in three periods of New Mexico history: the colonial period, the Mexican period, and the United States territorial period. Padre Martinez was born Antonio Jose Martin in Abiquiu, New Mexico in 1793 to Antonio Severino Martin and Maria Carmen Santisteban. They were New Mexicans, northern New Mexicans. She was from that same area. So was Antonio Severino. They started their family up there in the 1790s. And then they moved by the early 1800s to the Taos area, where Antonio Severino acquires a lot of land and a lot of political power. So by the time Antonio Jose is about 20 years old or so, he marries a local woman and they have a child. And then sadly, his wife dies. She passes away. So then Antonio goes around 1820 to Durango, Mexico to study to be a priest. He studies with the Jesuits down there, and he's infused with the spirit of revolution. Mexico is in the throes of gaining her independence from Spain, and so is New Mexico for that matter. So he leaves New Mexico, Antonio Jose Martin, and he returns to New Mexico, Padre Antonio Jose Martinez. And he is quite an amazing guy. He is an expert in canon law. He studies that in Durango. And when he comes to New Mexico, he realizes from his experiences that education is crucial to the survival and thriving of a community. And it just so happens that Mexico at this time is also wanting to implement public education throughout the new nation, including New Mexico. So it's a good situation for Padre Martinez. He brings the first printing press to New Mexico, and he focuses on literacy, reading and writing and speaking, because he knows that these are the keys to learning and to being educated. He also starts a seminary here for local men because he believes that local men should be educated and formed to be priests. Up to that point, typically they were from Spain or Mexico. During the colonial period, we had one native New Mexican priest, Santiago Roybal. But generally speaking, they were from the outside. And Padre Martinez thought that local people should be the priests because they would understand the fascinating and esoteric culture that had evolved here throughout the centuries, including our folk Catholicism. Padre Martinez was also an advocate for the local brotherhood of penitentes, los hermanos penitentes, that had also evolved in New Mexico in the early 1800s as a reaction to the shortage of priests and the conflict between Franciscans and diocesan priests that often left Pueblo people and Nuevo Mexicanos neglected spiritually. Also, what I find fascinating about Padre Martinez was he was one of the political priests of New Mexico and Mexico. When New Mexico became connected to Mexico in the South politically, as the new nation was created in 1821, typically outlying areas, whether it was Nuevo Mexico or Texas, California, or Chihuahua, Michoacan, Oaxaca, all these different regions of Mexico, they would send representatives to the political centers of Mexico, whether it was Chihuahua or Mexico City, to represent their region. New Mexico, again, was not a state. We were a territory, but nonetheless, we were intensely connected to Mexico politically. And it was during this time period that priests like Father Martinez and Father Rada, they would be political representatives of New Mexico to the federal government down south. So he operates in this world of politics and religion, which are blended to a point because Mexico had its roots in a system where monarchy and religion, Roman Catholicism, were heavily connected and in bed with each other. So this was a natural evolution, and he was also an advocate of the people, for the poor. He actually, in the 1830s, had challenged the Catholic Church's mandate that all Catholics must tithe 10% of their income to the church to support the priests. So he actually was able to work and convince the church hierarchy to give the New Mexicans a dispensation that they didn't have to tithe to get sacraments. In other words, they could have their babies baptized, or their children could be married, or they could go to confession, receive the last rites without having to pay for them. We had a barter economy here for the most part, so it's not like the New Mexicans wouldn't contribute. They would, but usually it was giving an animal or some crops, something like that, animal skins, animal hides to pay the priests to help them along. But generally speaking, he advocated for the poor and was a very highly intelligent and thoughtful person. Now, what's interesting when we get into the late Mexican period, what I find fascinating about Father Martinez is when there's a clash with the Americans, when the Americans invade New Mexico and invade Mexico in 1846, there's resistance, as you can imagine. The people here, the Mexican people, are fighting for their country, the country of Mexico. They're fighting for their lands, for their families, for their communities. And at one point in Taos, American soldiers start to capture Pueblo and Nuevo Mexicano fighters, soldiers, and they threaten to execute them as traitors against the United States. Padre Martinez gets wind of this, and he actually writes a letter to the American officials, and he challenges that. He says, you cannot do this. This is illegal. They're not traitors. This is not the United States. This is Mexico. They are patriots. They're fighting for their country. They're fighting for their families and for their towns and villages, and you cannot execute them as traitors. So he put a stop to that, and it's kind of indicative of the kind of person he was. We'll see once New Mexico becomes part of the United States, he will once again become an advocate for New Mexicans. He will still stay very political, but it's not just in the territorial government that he's political. It will be in a clash with the hierarchical Roman Catholic Church when New Mexico is finally appointed a bishop in 1850. That's it for now. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time. Hasta luego. Bye.